Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever considered the hidden journey of the medicines we rely on daily? It's far more complex and, globally intertwined than most of us realize. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the fascinating world of the global active pharmaceutical ingredients, or API, market. This isn't just about chemicals. It's really about the fundamental building blocks of our health and the intricate sort of global dance that brings them to us. We're drawing our insights from a comprehensive analysis by cognitive market research. That gives us vital revenue data, growth projections, and, well, the powerful forces shaping this critical industry.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating here is understanding not just the massive financial scale of this market, I mean, the numbers are huge,
Yeah.
but also the delicate balance of factors, everything from groundbreaking innovation to complex geopolitics. These factors determine whether these essential ingredients are readily available and affordable to you. Our mission really is to give you a shortcut to understanding this vital sector with all the surprising facts and crucial implications.
Let's dive right into the big picture then, because you said it, this market is absolutely booming. When we talk about big, how big are we talking globally?
Well, in 2021, the global API market was valued at nearly $170 billion. That's billion with a B.
Wow.
And it's on a remarkable trajectory. It's projected to surge to over $220 billion by 2025, and eventually topping an impressive $370 billion by 2033.
Okay, so that's significant growth.
It is. This reflects a steady compound annual growth rate, or NEGR, of about 6.7% over that period. And this isn't just random growth. The primary drivers are quite clear. We're seeing rising drug demand globally, the expanding production of more affordable generic medicines, and unfortunately, an increasing prevalence of chronic diseases worldwide. Those are the big three.
So on a practical level, what does this massive growth actually mean for you, the listener, the consumer? Is it simply more medicines on the shelves?
Ultimately, yes, it directly impacts the availability and, crucially, the cost of the drugs you might need. When the API market expands, it generally means more of these crucial ingredients are being produced. This can lead to more diverse drug options, and especially with that growth of generics we mentioned.
Right, the cheaper alternatives.
Exactly. Potentially more affordable medications reaching consumers. It really comes down to access and affordability, but at a massive scale.
Okay, here's where I think it gets really interesting, the global distribution. You hinted at it, but this market isn't uniform across the globe, is it? It's not just about how big it is, but where it's growing fastest, which regions are truly leading the charge, and where are we seeing the most dynamic shifts?
That's a great point, because while North America still holds the largest revenue share, it accounted for roughly $70 billion in 2021, and it's projected to nearly double to about $145 billion by 2033. But the true acceleration, the real speed, is happening elsewhere. Within North America, sure, the U.S. remains the clear leader. But it's worth noting that Mexico is expanding at an impressive 8% annually. That makes it the fastest growing market in that region.
Interesting. So even within the dominant region, there are pockets of faster growth.
Precisely. And Europe also shows steady growth. It was valued at about $32 billion in 2021, expected to reach over $65 billion by 2033. Key players like the UK, Germany, France, they're seeing consistent expansion. However, the real story, the headline for dynamic growth, lies squarely in the Asia-Pacific region.
Ah, okay. That's what I was wondering about.
Yeah, Asia-Pacific is truly the powerhouse of the future for APIs. It's expanding from roughly $47 billion in 2021 to a projected $114 billion by 2033. And that's driven by a robust 7.6% CAGR overall for the region.
And within Asia Pacific.
Well, China plays a central and ever-growing role here. Huge market, huge producer. And India is experiencing an even higher growth rate, nearly 9.5% annually.
9.5%.
Yes. These two nations are, frankly, fundamentally reshaping where the world's pharmaceutical ingredients are manufactured. We're also seeing solid, albeit smaller, growth in places like South America, particularly Brazil, and emerging markets in the Middle East, with Saudi Arabia standing out, and parts of Africa too, though the growth there is a bit slower.
It's fascinating to see that map sort of redraw itself, with Asia Pacific clearly becoming this manufacturing epicenter. But what's really fueling this global expansion at a deeper level? What are the engines driving all this growth we're seeing?
Right, if we connect this to the bigger picture, there are sort of three primary forces driving this significant growth. First, there's the increasing prevalence of chronic and infectious diseases globally. It's an unfortunate reality.
Yeah, things like diabetes, cancer.
Exactly. Diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disorders, these aren't going away.
Yeah.
And they create a consistent growing demand for APIs and global health emergencies, or epidemics, as we've unfortunately
Wasn't
seen.
pandemics?
Precisely. They further amplify the need for specific antiviral and antibiotic APIs, boosting production often when we least expect it.
Okay, so that's demand. What else?
Second, the growth in generic drug production is a pivotal factor, huge factor. As patents for those expensive branded drugs expire, the pharmaceutical industry sees a strong shift towards more cost-effective generic alternatives. This is especially pronounced in developing economies, but also in developed ones where healthcare systems are trying to manage costs.
Makes sense. Get the same effect for less money.
Essentially, yes.
Mm.
And third, there's been a very prominent trend of outsourcing API manufacturing to lower-cost regions, particularly India and China, as we discussed with the regional growth. These countries offer significant economic advantages. Think reduced labor, cheaper raw materials, and that allows the big global pharmaceutical companies to focus their resources on, well, expensive research and development and marketing their new drugs.
So it sounds like a perfect storm in a way. You've got increasing global demand meeting this strategic shift towards cost efficiency, but that pursuit of efficiency, while vital, often introduces new complexities, doesn't it? So if that's the engine of growth, what are the significant roadblocks? What makes this global API market anything but a smooth ride?
That raises a really important question. What are the challenges? Because where there's opportunity like this, there are certainly obstacles. One major barrier is strict regulatory compliance. It has to be there, but it's tough.
You mean like the FDA EMA rules?
Exactly. Meeting the rigorous requirements set by authorities like the FDA in the US and the EMA in Europe, it demands significant investment. Investment in quality control, facility upgrades, constant auditing. This can really slow down market entry, especially for smaller or emerging manufacturers. It ensures safety, absolutely, but it comes at a cost.
Okay, regulation is one hurdle. What else?
Another significant challenge is raw material price volatility and supply chain disruptions. Imagine like trying to bake a cake, but the flour price suddenly triples overnight, or the eggs just aren't available for weeks.
Right, throws everything off.
It does. For APIs, limited access to crucial starting ingredients or sudden price spikes can lead to serious production delays and significantly elevate manufacturing costs, impacting the entire supply chain right down to the pharmacy shelf.
And you mentioned a third.
Yes, environmental constraints. This is a growing hurdle. The chemical synthesis of APIs can sometimes generate hazardous waste. It's just the nature of the chemistry. Managing this properly requires advanced waste treatment systems and strict compliance with environmental protection laws. This isn't just about being a good corporate citizen, though that's important. It adds real operational costs and complexity for manufacturers globally.
These are certainly complex issues. Regulation, supply chain volatility, environmental costs. It impacts everyone along that chain. It makes you appreciate the complexity behind every single pill, doesn't it?
Given these challenges, are there any innovative approaches or new trends emerging, ways the industry is trying to address these hurdles or just reshape the market?
Absolutely. Yeah, the industry isn't static. Beyond the drivers and restraints, several transformative trends are really reshaping the API landscape looking ahead. One notable trend is a definite shift toward high-potency APIs, or HP APIs, and also biotech APIs.
Okay, break those down a bit. Biotech APIs.
Think of biotech APIs as complex medicines derived from living organisms like proteins, antibodies, much more complicated than traditional small molecule chemical drugs. And high potency means they're incredibly powerful, effective even in tiny doses. They're often used for highly targeted therapies, like in many modern cancer treatments.
Right. Personalized medicine type stuff. Exactly. Both of these types, HP APIs and biotech APIs, require highly specialized facilities, very tightly controlled environments for safe handling and processing. So their manufacturing is inherently much more complex and costly.
Okay, so more complex drugs. What other trends?
Another really significant trend is the adoption of green chemistry principles. Companies are increasingly, I think genuinely, striving to reduce their environmental footprint. They're doing this by using more eco-friendly solvents, different chemical techniques that are less wasteful.
Improving energy efficiency too, I suppose.
Yes, improving energy efficiency, designing processes to minimize waste from the start. It aligns the industry with global sustainability goals, which is, a huge push right now everywhere.
That's good to hear. And you mentioned one more evolution.
Yes, a key one is the increasing implementation of continuous manufacturing. So instead of making APIs in big separate batches, like baking one giant cake at a time, continuous manufacturing is more like a constantly running production line.
Okay, like an assembly line for chemicals.
Sort of, yeah. It streamlines production, it helps ensure more consistent quality, and it allows for real-time monitoring and adjustments. This ultimately improves both responsiveness and efficiency in API manufacturing, which is crucial in such a volatile market where being able to adapt quickly is really key.
It's clear the industry is evolving then, embracing these new, more complex technologies and trying to adopt sustainable practices. But there's a recent development, something you touched on earlier with geopolitics, that has added a completely new layer of complexity, hasn't there? One that really highlights how interconnected global health and, well, global politics truly are.
Yes, that's right. Our sources highlight a significant and relatively new factor impacting things right now. That's the reinstatement of what's been termed Liberation Day Tariffs. This was by President Trump this past April in 2025.
Okay, so tariffs. What specifically are we talking about here?
This policy has introduced tariffs ranging anywhere from 10% up to 46% on imports. Imports of APIs themselves, but also packaging materials and related manufacturing equipment coming from both China and India.
46%. That's huge. What's the impact been?
Well, according to the analysis, these measures have had a severe impact, particularly on generic drug manufacturers in the U.S. It's led directly to increased production costs and prompted significant delays in getting generics to market.
So the companies making the affordable versions are hit hardest.
That seems to be the case. As a result, biopharmaceutical companies and those contract manufacturing organizations, the CMOs that make drugs for others, they are now under immense pressure to identify and secure alternative sourcing channels, basically find suppliers outside China and India or pay the tariffs.
And is it just a U.S. issue?
No, because global trade is interconnected. Once more, the report mentions retaliatory tariffs from the European Union. These have added further strain on U.S. exporters trying to sell their products into Europe, creating this sort of global ripple effect.
Wow, it's not just manufacturing, is it?
Now, it goes further. We're even seeing reports of clinical trials, the testing of new drugs being delayed. Why? Because of these heightened costs impacting the price of the investigational drugs and even the diagnostic tools used in the trials.
So this policy change is slowing down even the development of future medicines.
That's the reported consequence, yes. And in such a volatile landscape, you can see why real-time market research becomes absolutely vital for these companies. They need constantly updated information to track supplier reliability, raw material prices in these rapidly shifting policy landscapes. It's about empowering them to adapt their sourcing strategies quickly just to maintain supply chain continuity.
This certainly adds a challenging new dimension to an already complex global industry. It impacts everything from those big manufacturing decisions right down to drug development and ultimately, what's available and what it costs at your local pharmacy.
Okay.
So we've covered a lot here. The immense growth, the key drivers like chronic disease and generics, the challenges regulations, supply chains, environment, the innovations like biotech and green chemistry, and even how these big geopolitical shifts like the recent tariffs are directly impacting the availability and cost of the very building blocks of our medicines. Hopefully you now have a much clearer understanding of the forces at play in this critical sector.
Yes, stepping back for just a moment, this deep dive really shows us how incredibly interconnected global health, economics, and policy truly are. They can't be separated. And this raises an important question, I think, for you to consider. How will the global pharmaceutical landscape balance that relentless pursuit of cost efficiency, often through outsourcing? How will it balance that with the increasing geopolitical pressures we just discussed and a growing undeniable need for supply chain resilience, especially for essential medicines?
That's a huge question.
It is. And ultimately, what does this ongoing tension mean for the cost and the availability of drugs that you or someone you care about might need in the future? Something to think about.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the global active pharmaceutical ingredients market. Ever stop to think about what, actually makes your medication work? I mean, beyond the box or the color of the pill, there's this critical thing inside.
The active pharmaceutical ingredient,
Correct.
API.
Exactly, the API. These aren't just like complicated chemical names. They're the core part, the bit that delivers the actual medical benefit in, well, almost every drug out there. So today, we're doing a deep dive into this really fascinating, complex world, the global active pharmaceutical ingredients market.
It's a huge one.
It is. We've been digging into the latest reports, forecasts from cognitive market research, actually. And our mission here is to really unpack the forces shaping this vital industry.
Understand what's driving it.
Yeah, and figure out what it means for the future and, importantly, what it means for you listening. Okay, let's unpack this.
What's fascinating here is
Yeah.
just how fundamental these APIs are. I mean, they're the building blocks, right? Most people probably never give them a second thought,
Right.
but they are absolutely critical. Global health, the entire pharma industry, it all hinges on APIs.
Hmm.
The fact that we have effective medicines at all, from basic painkillers to really advanced cancer drugs,
Yeah.
it all comes down to being able to make and reliably get these APIs.
Hmm.
It's truly the bedrock of modern healthcare. It influences everything: drug development, patient access, you name it.
And speaking of bedrock, the sheer scale. The numbers we're seeing from cognitive market research are, frankly, pretty eye-opening.
They are substantial.
In 2021, the global API market was valued at nearly $170 billion. Billion.
Already.
But it's not stopping there. It's projected to more than double. They're estimating, $370 billion by 2033,
That's a projection, yeah.
which works out to a compound annual growth rate, CAGR, of almost 7%. That points to an industry that's just constantly rapidly expanding.
And geographically, if we look at where this growth is happening, North America still holds a really big piece of the pie.
Mm-hmm.
Sales, there were already, over $70 billion back in 2021?
Yeah, that's right.
And they're expected to hit well over $140 billion by 2033. So that's still a solid CAGR, over 6%.
And within North America, the U.S. is the big player, right?
Yeah, unpredictably. Expected to nearly double its market size, too.
Yeah.
But what's interesting within the region is Mexico.
Really?
Mexico's actually expanded the fastest there.
Yeah.
An 8% CAGR. That signals some, potentially significant shifts happening.
Wow, 8% for Mexico? That's quite a jump. And Europe, also a major player, I assume.
Definitely substantial activity. It was valued just under $32 billion in 2021.
Okay.
And forecast to reach over $65 billion by 2033. Now, you have the big economies, the UK, Germany, France.
Yeah.
They're major players.
Sure.
But the reports show Spain, Denmark, and Russia are actually posting higher CGRs.
Yeah.
Spain's leading that pack at nearly 7.6%.
Okay, but here's where I thought it got really interesting. The Asia-Pacific region.
Ah, yes. The growth there is phenomenal.
It seems like the most robust growth overall, projected to go from around $47 billion in 2021 to a massive $114 billion by 2033. That's a strong 7.6% CAGR overall for the region.
And China is obviously central to that.
Of course. But India actually has an even higher CAGR, right? Nearly 9.5%, projected to hit over $14 billion.
That's right. It's quite remarkable. This isn't just, a manufacturing shift. It feels more fundamental.
Like a rebalancing act.
Exactly. A rebalancing of power in the global pharma supply chain. It could create new hubs for innovation, more competition.
It really could. And it's not just these huge regions, is it? The growth seems pretty widespread.
It truly does. You look at South America poised for significant expansion. From over $9 billion to projected over $20 billion by 2033. Brazil's leading the charge there.
Right.
The Middle East API market is climbing too, over 7.3% CAGR. Saudi Arabia stands out at 8%. Shows the region's growing pharmaceutical ambitions. And even Africa, while starting from a smaller base, is emerging. Projected growth from nearly $5 billion to almost $10 billion.
Wow.
The global spread, the interconnectedness.
Yeah.
It's really quite something.
Okay, so with all this growth, this massive expansion everywhere, what's actually driving it? What are the key forces behind this boom in the API market? The Cognitive Market Research Report highlights a few big ones.
Yeah, several powerful factors. One major one is the increasing prevalence of diseases, both chronic and infectious, globally.
Makes sense.
Conditions like diabetes, cancers, cardiovascular problems. They create this consistent growing demand for the necessary APIs.
Right, steady demand.
And then, as we've all seen, global health crises can dramatically spike the need for certain APIs, antivirals, antibiotics. That boosts production for both the original branded drugs and the generics that follow.
So basically, more health challenges mean more need for these core ingredients.
Pretty much, yes. Another really pivotal factor is the growth in generic drugs.
Ah, yes.
As patents expire on major blockbuster drugs, you naturally see this strong shift towards more affordable generic versions.
Especially in developing countries.
Exactly. Especially where manufacturing costs might be lower. And that ties directly into another huge driver, outsourcing API manufacturing.
To places like India and China.
Precisely. They often offer significant cost advantages, lower labor, maybe cheaper raw materials. This lets the big global pharma companies focus their own, often limited, resources on R&D, marketing, the really expensive stuff.
Got it. But surely it's not all just straightforward growth. It can't be all smooth sailing. What are the roadblocks, the complexities facing this market?
That's a critical point. It's definitely not simple. One huge barrier is strict regulatory compliance.
The FDA, EMA, those kinds of bodies.
Exactly. Meeting the very stringent requirements set by the FDA in the US, the EMA in Europe, and others, it requires massive investment. Quality control, facility upgrades, constant auditing.
Which must slow things down.
It really can. It makes market entry tough, particularly if you're a smaller or newer manufacturer.
Hmm.
Then there's the constant challenge of volatile raw material prices and just the ever-present risk of supply chain disruptions. If you suddenly can't get a key starting material or its price shoots up
Production delays, costs go up.
big time.
Yeah.
Significant delays, much higher manufacturing costs. It's a constant balancing act.
And I imagine the environmental side adds another layer of difficulty.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Environmental regulations are another major hurdle. Making APIs. The synthesis process often creates hazardous waste.
Right.
So you need advanced treatment systems. You need to comply strictly with environmental laws, which are constantly evolving. That naturally adds to your operating costs.
And requires innovation in how things are actually made.
Constant innovation, yes.
Okay, so we've got these drivers pushing growth, restraints kind of holding it back or adding complexity. What about the trends? What's shaping the future of how APIs are made? How's the industry changing?
Looking ahead, yeah, there are some really notable trends. One is the shift towards high-potency APIs or HP APIs, and also biotech APIs.
High potency, like for cancer drugs.
Exactly. These are incredibly powerful compounds. Think advanced cancer therapies, personalized medicine. They need very specialized facilities, highly controlled environments just to handle them safely during production.
I can imagine.
We're also seeing a big push towards green chemistry principles.
Okay, that sounds positive.
It is. Companies are actively trying to reduce their environmental footprint using eco-friendly solvents, better techniques, improving energy efficiency, basically trying to align with global sustainability goals.
That sounds like a fantastic development, obviously, for the planet, but how hard is it to actually implement green chemistry across such a massive, established global industry?
That's a really important question. It's definitely a positive trend, but scaling it up has challenges.
Like cost.
Initial investment costs, yeah.
Mm.
And sometimes needing new technological breakthroughs to make it feasible at scale. But the long-term benefits, both for the environment and potentially for operational efficiency too, are really driving adoption.
Okay.
And then there's a manufacturing trend that sounds, well, pretty cutting edge.
You mean continuous manufacturing?
Precisely. Instead of making APIs in big separate batches,
Right.
this method streamlines production. Processes run continuously. It helps ensure more consistent quality, and you can monitor and adjust things in real time.
So better efficiency?
Much better efficiency, improved responsiveness.
Mm.
It's a significant leap forward for optimizing production, especially in such a complex global supply chain.
It really sounds like an incredibly complex, dynamic market. And what's also fascinating is how outside events, things totally unrelated to the science or manufacturing, can just throw a wrench into everything.
Oh, absolutely.
We saw a really stark example of that, didn't we, with the reinstatement of those Liberation Day tariffs under President Trump back in April 2025.
Yes, that specific policy action introduced a major layer of, well, complexity and vulnerability.
These were tariffs on imports from China and India.
That's right, on APIs, packaging materials, related equipment,
Yeah.
ranging from 10% up to, I think, 46% in some cases. Yeah, and the impact was significant, especially for generic drug makers in the U.S. It led directly to higher production costs, caused delays.
Right.
It also forced biopharma companies, the contract manufacturers, everyone, to scramble and find alternative sources, often more expensive ones.
And the source mentioned ripple effects beyond the U.S., too.
It did. Retaliatory tariffs from the EU added more strain on U.S. exporters. And perhaps most concerningly, even critical clinical trials faced delays.
Because of higher costs for drugs and diagnostics.
Exactly. It just goes to show this isn't just abstract economic policy. It directly hits drug availability, patient costs, and it reveals these hidden vulnerabilities in our healthcare systems. Vulnerabilities that could leave us really exposed in future crises.
It really does underscore just how sensitive this global API market is, how interconnected, and maybe how fragile even well-established supply chains can be. Okay, so let's just quickly recap. We've looked at this global API market projected to more than double from nearly $170 billion in 2021 to over $370 billion by 2033.
Driven by that near 7% CAGR.
Right. It's truly global. North America leads, Asia Pacific's growing fastest, but there's significant activity everywhere. It's complex, it's absolutely vital, and it's constantly changing.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Mm-hmm.
we've seen that delicate balance, haven't we? Powerful drivers like rising disease rates,
Mm.
the boom in generics, strategic
That,
outsourcing,
yeah.
weighed against those major restraints, strict regulations, volatile material costs, environmental pressures,
Mm-hmm.
and then looking forward, these transformative trends,
Mm-hmm.
high-potency APIs, the push for green chemistry that move towards continuous manufacturing, all shaping how our medicines will actually be made tomorrow.
And we definitely can't ignore the real-world jolts from external factors, like those Liberation Day tariffs in 2025. That example really drove home how dynamic this all is. The ripple effects on costs, supply chains, even clinical research, it highlights just how globally intertwined medicine has become. So thinking about all this, what does it actually mean for, say, pharmaceutical independence, for national health security? Especially when the world seems to rely more and more on this globalized API supply chain.
This raises an important question for all of us, really. What are the broader implications of these huge global market shifts? Not just for medicine accessibility and innovation today, but what about for future generations? How secure and resilient is this foundation we all depend on?